All right, let's do it. All right, guys. So today we're going to be talking about cold call training and really getting people on the phone. Um, so this is an important aspect because a lot of the times, if we look at our metrics, the conversion to get an inquiry when someone actually answers is much higher than when you leave a voicemail and rely on them to call you back. So, and also the idea of, just being top of mind and your voice is very memorable. We all sound different, and that's a beautiful thing about humanity, but also um, the way we do business, because your voice is something that will always be remembered. Um, so one of the things that I thought about, different aspects of the getting people on the phone really that I do that I usually think of, and it's really just comes on intentionality. So I put together 5 different tips, thinking about what works, what doesn't work, but also what has worked in the past and continues to work. So it's almost like a stop, start, continue, start, stop, continue. So the first key strategy I came up with was the consistency and gratitude.
Hmm.
It's always important to be consistent with your process. So we have a process already in place here that's very effective, but what's nice about it is that if we follow the process, we're most likely going to yield results. And so consistency is so important because if we get away from that consistent proactive process, we're probably going to find ourselves in a little hunch. So the way I looked at it was, how are we consistent? And how am I personally consistent? How can I share that with you guys as well? And so I thought, I'm consistent in the way that I make sure I hit my number every day. So no matter what, there's a non-negotiable, and that's a minimum of 20, which I'd like to be 25 calls a day, which we're getting there. But I keep getting people on the phone, so it takes a little bit longer to get to 25. So it's really just being consistent with that approach. So making that non-negotiable, hitting your number every day and knowing what that number is. And then also, there's a thing to be said about when you do talk to someone, having gratitude and helping them feel valued. So gratitude is important because a lot of times, we get them on the phone and we're so eager just to get straight to the point. Hey, I have this awesome service I can provide for you and your clients, and providing financing. But then where does the gratitude come in? Where do we thank them for actually answering the phone and taking the time to talk to us? And that's really a separation factor where I don't think many cold callers will ever thank someone for picking up and also taking the time to chat with them. So it's a differentiator. And also, it allows them to feel more valued as humans and also professionals in the workplace. I always like to thank people for their time because their time is valuable. When they're chasing deals, they have so many other priorities that are most likely, honestly, you know, conflicting with us trying to talk to them. So for them to take that 5 seconds or 10 minutes or whatever it is, it's something that we should share gratitude for,
Hmm.
um, and also just not allowing them to forget we exist. It's important that they'll know our names, they'll know our voice, they'll know that we are good people out there to do good things for them and their clients, but also we're in it for the right reasons. And also being responsive. It's important to be responsive because if, let's just say, you call them, they don't answer, but they call you back, you want to make sure you pick up because they actually took the time to call you back or listen to your voicemail, and it proves that they actually wanted to talk to you. So that's always a good sign. And then also just giving them a reason to want to pick up. So what about you makes them want to pick up the phone? um one example actually that I personally had, and we can share examples along the way here, is I called on a guy about 3 or 4 times in the past. And the last call I had with him just this week, he said, listen, you've called me enough times. I think it's appropriate to finally get that meeting set. So he opened the opportunity for us to have that meeting, where I've asked him for a meeting every single time. And he said, yeah, yeah, whatever, just email me. And then this time it was, all right, let's have the meeting and let's schedule it. And so we're going to meet up in later March. So, it came down to finally getting that consistent, proactive approach, showing gratitude, but also being consistent with how we do things here. And it led to a meeting after 4 calls. So, um, and does anyone have anything to share on consistency, gratitude, or any examples of how that's impacted your calls, or how you guys have seen any success there?
Yeah, I think that like
it always seems like the second call, that there's, the first call, if you're in the door, have some sort of conversation, it's good. But the second call, if you're reaching back out to somebody and it's, hey, we connected, in this time, and, you know, there's always just a different reaction. People seem to respond with, "Oh yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, good to hear from you again." And instead of just like the cold, it's gone from like the cold call to the warm or lukewarm call, and it seems like progress. Kind of going with the consistency. Um, but yeah, I think that definitely, you know, reaching out to the same people and having something to offer, but being respectful of them is key.
Yeah, I really like those two, the consistency and gratitude. I think a consistency, it I always just think of trust, because the consistency builds trust. I mean, consistently, plus consistent behavior that's positive can build trust. And so I think that's a huge part of the success. I love the gratitude, because we live in a day and age that there's just, you know, because gratitude really is almost an attitude of humility. It's looking outside yourself to say thank you to somebody else and value them. And we just don't live in that kind of environment anymore, where it's just, appreciating. So I like that a lot. I think that's a good long-term approach and a tactic. So I think it's great.
Well, I don't cold call, but I will say that I can implement the same when I ask for Google reviews. Because sometimes I'll ask and they don't respond, or that y'all do it later. And then so, I follow up with them and just say, just try to remind them. And obviously when I do the initial email, I just really put in my email, thank you, ahead of time for, um, I don't say ahead of time, but I think I'm ahead of time for even taking the time to do it.
Yeah.
So that's my experience.
Great. Love it.
Awesome. Thank you guys. That's great, great points there. And so the second tip I was thinking about was using your tools. So there's a lot of times where it's like, I hit kind of a wall where I'm struggling a little bit, not really getting the momentum or the progress I want to make. And so it's almost like back to basics, using your tools that we have that are at our disposal. It's almost like when something's right in front of you and you can't see it because we have our tunnel vision or blinders, wherever that is. There's something we said about, having a fresh set of eyes, but also taking advantage of resources available. So one thing I thought about was, their Salesforce, actually, the way we've innovated it, it has timestamps on the last time you called someone and the exact time of day. And so what's interesting is that people are creatures of habit, and that most likely means that if you call them around that time or that day even, that might be the time they set aside for, catching up on their calls or whatever it is. So they're most likely going to be available. Um, and so you can actually take advantage of that and try to call them around the same time. And it's actually worked a lot with me, where I just look right back. Okay, I called them at 10:43, so probably 10:45 might not be a bad idea, and it usually works. So I'll look back and just look at those timestamps, and I leverage that as a resource as well. And also, if you're not having success, you can also turn that around and don't call them at that time. So maybe it's hey, maybe I should try to call them earlier in the morning or later in the morning, or maybe even in the afternoon. Maybe that would be that sweet spot. So there's actually someone that this happened with over at Collier's. Um, it's a lady named Carrie. I could never reach her in the morning, and so one day actually, we're kind of reading a little book called Cold Calling Tips at Work, and there was an example of someone that said he just does one last call before he leaves work, and that led to his success. And so I actually did that with Carrie, and what do you know? She picked up the phone. So it was kind of a unique example of how, educating ourselves and also being strategic in our approach does yield those results. So I did catch Carrie for once. And so instead of having voicemail, it ended up being 5 voicemails, 1 call and connected. So it was pretty good. So would have probably never reached out to her or never really actually caught her if I kept calling her in the morning. So that was a little win there. So those are some examples there. How about you guys? Tom, any examples, or Dave? Or I know Lana is kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I got my unique ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, um, I always say if you want to have a good conversation, you have to have the T's, which is timing, temperament, and tactic, right? If you all those 3 have to come into play. It's kind of like with my wife when we were first married. I had to learn the hard way that having good, deep conversations in the morning is a bad idea, right? So she's not a morning person, and so we just had to learn to have conversations at different times. So it just reminds me of how important timing is for people, because their temperament will be very different. I mean, if you talk to somebody on a Friday, that's going to be very different than on a Monday, right? Because they've got the whole week ahead of them. They just came off the weekend. Mondays are typically just more of the high stress day because everything's now just on full load. So yeah, I think that's been my experience, is picking the right time and calling that person and just being and changing until you do. I like the idea of the end of the day. I have found that that's a really good time because people are winding down. They tend to just be a little bit more less rushed because they don't have a time schedule per se. So I think that's great. I love it. Good idea.
Yeah, I think time of day and then also day of the week, definitely, because if you try somebody on Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon, if Wednesday's just their busy day, you're gonna get the same result. So yeah, switching up day of the week is important too.
Thanks, guys. So for tip number 3, a big thing I thought about was also adding value. So, what value add are we going to bring to the table? Where Dave does an amazing job of providing us with different marketing items. Our integrity capital sheets, our hot money, also deals closed, things that we can kind of just share as it's almost like a brag book. Like, what have we done that's so amazing, and why would you want to work with us? So allowing them to see what successes we have had, but also the value that we bring to them. So um, I always think about documenting notes from the last call, because I actually had this mistake happen where I called on someone and I didn't document the notes because I think I was maybe distracted or something right after. Someone may have called right after, and then I just kind of moved on. And I said, "Oh, it looks like I remember that you focus on industrial properties." And said, "Actually, no, I focus on hotels." And I said, "Oh, great." So it was kind of awkward. Obviously, we worked our way around that, but that's the importance of documenting our call notes, because we talk to so many people and it's so easy for us to get distracted. And the only thing we might have is the notes from the last call. So just consistency there around, documenting those notes, being, accurate and concise. So then they actually remember it. It kind of proves something about you when you remember what they focus on and what you guys talked about. Because a lot of times I'm even reminding different brokers or, clients what we last did talk about. So there are times where us having our notes keeps us in the right, in the right, in the driver's seat in that way, by kind of leading the charge, and also not allowing them to have to do too much of that remembering by any means. So and also just share what they want to know. So on calls, they usually ask, "What is it that you need from me?" or "What is it that I could be providing you to help support you better?" And they usually will tell you, "Well, you know, here are some opportunities I'm having that I'm struggling with, and here's some things that would be really nice to have." Like maybe it's, what are the SBA rates, or it could be anything from, what how much inventory is in the market in different asset types or whatever it is. It could be a plethora of things, but just knowing what they want to hear, because then when you do call, they'll always want to pick up because it's like, oh, Dan probably has something he wants to share. So some people even just tell me every time you release a hot money rate sheet, can you just call me and talk through it? I say, perfect. So I just put them on my call list every month. We put out the sheet and make sure I call them. So it can be the most basic things. And then that leads to a deal at some point, or just being that source of info. Um, and just having a reason to call them, because I have been guilty of this. Hey, just checking in. How are things going?
Yeah.
Good to talk to you again. And they're like, all right, well, we'll see you later. And then it's an empty phone call.
Yep.
Like, oh, great. I got a touch, but what did that actually come out to? Nothing. So, and then they're going to just stop answering if that's always the call that you have. So, adding that value is so critical. And they will pick up when you call because they know you have information to share that will directly relate to what they're trying to achieve. So, um, you know, it's just so important when, someone you can kind of rely on that partnership and really just adding that value in that way. So those are some things that I've seen. And I'll go ahead, Lana.
Yeah, I would just want to add something else that's good. Like, when you're like, for example, when you were you call once a month, for the rates, or you have that, they may not be doing anything, at the moment, but maybe they have a business partner that comes to him and say, hey, I'm having, this issue, or I need this or that. And, oh, I know this guy that could probably help you, and here's Dan's number or contact info. And, so that's a good thing too.
Absolutely. And that happens a lot actually, where sometimes it's maybe the broker I called on doesn't need help, but then his partner comes up and says, hey, I'm having trouble finding financing for this client. Do you know who I can call? They say, call Dan. So it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also some firms also just don't have a good contact for financing. So one of my buddies over at Newmark, he told me that they don't have a good relationship with any brokers. And so he basically gave me call on people here because they will want to talk to you. So just being that source of value is so critical. And also just being responsive, being part of who we are will ultimately lead us to the success.
Yeah, I like, your, from a production perspective, the amount of production that you do and the growth in your personal production will be over time, a direct reflection of the amount of value that you add to people. So, if your aim is, think about two different perspectives of aim. So one aim is, I just want to make a bunch of money, gimme, 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 gimme. The other aim is, how do I add as much value as I can to this person? Now, both might produce, there might be some production in both, but I think you'll surpass over time if you have more of a value added mentality, because it's servant oriented in a sense, and it's proactive. Now you're really intentionally trying to find a way. One of the things I do pretty consistently is try to connect people. Is a great way to add values, like hey, let me connect you with so-and-so, and then also bringing people into deals or trying to partner them up on things. It's a tremendous amount of value because there's such an intangibleness to it, and they'll never forget you. So it's the CPIG. There you go.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Back to basics. That's literally it. It's
Yep.
the CPIG works, and we do it every day, even unintentionally now. But and that's one of the tools that we do have, and it's a special thing because it works.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, tip number 4. It's always so funny because I think about this where, like me, I like to know about everyone. I kind of get a little nosy sometimes, I think, and I just like to ask about them and their families and where they're from. And the food that they come from, because food's important. So, so it's asking about them and just being friendly. I try to make it more about them and their background, who they are, and what makes them unique. Because if you learn about someone, they're more likely to also feel that comfort with you, and also the feeling becomes mutual, that it's not just about the pay or the deal, or it just adds a different kind of a substance to the conversation, where um, you know it it just becomes more personable, where you can really relate to someone differently. Like maybe you have you share something alike, like maybe you like to golf a lot or fish a lot, and you kind of talk about other things as well, because sometimes it's just nice to have a conversation other than work. So you can also bake those conversations in as you talk to people, and it also creates that trust, where it's you know I some people, they'll throw deals at me that come inbound, where they'll call me, but we had not talked about what deals they were working on in the last call we had. It was more just about them, their family, their dog got sick. Oh no, what do we do? And we kind of problem solve with like life solutions as well. But then they'll kind of surprise you with a deal that comes in suddenly, that's a sizable amount, and you're like, oh wow, that's great. So it's almost like not being a salesperson, but being more of an advocate for them too. And like I try so hard not to be salesy ever on the phone, and more making it about them and their success, and making them feel good, and knowing that we truly do care about them as human beings and individuals. um, and also they'll know, they will answer if you make them feel happy or fulfilled in some way. So maybe it's sharing a personal story that really hit you or impacted you in a deal, or even you know like, hey, I'm thinking about getting married one day. Like that stuff is interesting. And some really unique relationships I personally built have been just like talking about my 6-year relationship with Kelly, and how much we've learned about each other, and how much we struggle with things. And then hearing about them and their kids, and how they've struggled with having kids, or whatever it is, and having one in high school, deciding which school to go to, or there's a lot of different aspects of getting to know someone in a different way, and that ultimately will build that sense of unity. But also, another thing is, one thing I actually did was, one guy, he chose to work with another broker, or another finance, like another financial broker like we are, not us. And when the deal closed, I actually sent him a card congratulating him for closing the deal. And I did that more because I was just happy for him. He got the deal done, so ultimately he won. Although he didn't use me, it was still, I thought it was just a nice touch to kind of share, hey, I'm just happy that you got the deal done. I mean, it's okay you didn't use me, but you probably will one day, but maybe not this time. And I remember he called me right after, and he said, honestly, the other broker didn't even congratulate us for closing at all. Like it was just kind of like a transaction hit, and then ran away and never saw him again. So it did shine in a different way. So even though we didn't win that deal, we still shined in our own way. And so it just shows kind of the emphasis on the relationship rather than the transaction. Also, the cold calling book I mentioned earlier, one thing I liked is it says smile when you talk, because people can feel your smile when you do talk to them. So it's not, you're not just calling someone because you have to, or you're just trying to get the deal done and leave. It's more, hey, I'm actually happy to be talking to you, and this is actually really exciting for me. So they will feel that emotion as well. Also, an example is I learned one of the contacts that used to provide a few inquiries a week for me on like a lot of different deals. He wasn't being treated fairly on his team, and so I just call him, just ask how, because he actually split off his team, now he's alone, so he's not doing the volume he was doing prior. But one day he said, hey, sorry, I don't have anything for you. And I said, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm just glad to hear you're doing well, and the deals will come, and whenever they do, I'll be here. But ultimately, I just want to check in on you and make sure you're okay. And then I could tell it was like a different feel after that. So just, not going just after the deal, going after the relationship is more crucial. So
I love all this. Dan, you're going to be like tagged the Mr. Rogers of the commercial real estate finance. You're, you're like the happiest guy around. And you know, I think what's so good about this is it, number one, mimics the Christ model where others are more important, and which is huge. And it also, if you really think about it, it's very smart because you accomplish so many things. You value people, you serve them, but honestly, it's one of your competitive edges or competitive edge versus just becoming a commodity, because you know you deepen that relationship, and you just, you know, now someone else is knocking on their door, and they're like, okay, I've got value here with this, and I have a good relationship with them. You know, that's just one of the reasons to go. You know, I just go with Dan. You know, I don't. You know, I trust him. I know him. You know, so if you've ever called somebody, which I have over the years, and people say, hey, you know what, I've been working with this guy forever. I'm never going to change. So you don't bother calling, right? I actually get excited when I hear that because I'm like, man, that's awesome, because those are the kinds of relationships we want to develop. When someone else calls them, they're just going to go, you know, because how you win somebody is how you lose them, right? So if they win them on price and all they are is a price person, then you're going to lose them to price. You know, someone's going to say, I can get you a quarter point better. Okay, bye. So I love that approach.
Yeah, no, interestingly, there was a deal, that apartment deal that we're working on right now. The broker that the buyer was working with referred him to another guy, and he said, Dan, the reason I'm going to use you is because you actually talk to me. The other guy just wants to get me off the phone, you know. And so it was just it is a sacrifice for sure. I probably do fall behind in many ways because I do emphasize the person so much, but it's going to pay dividends doing that, and I know that, and I do it because I truly want to. I mean, if I was just trying to get everyone off the phone, they probably wouldn't want to talk to me anyway. So I'd probably spin my wheels much harder, um, and you know, it just, and that's how we are going to win those proactive and deepen our relationships with others. So it's very true. Um, so the last tip I have here is persistence. So a lot of times I do make calls, I leave a lot of voicemails, and you know, follow up with an email and find a way just to get them to remember what my name is, what I do, and who I am, what I'm calling for. You know, like yesterday, one guy finally picked up and he's like, listen, I'm 72 years old. I'm not trying to make new friends. And I said, well, that's all right. You know, maybe when I'm 72, I won't either. You know, so,
Maybe that's the reason you don't have friends.
yeah,
Right?
exactly. It was like, I was just kind of laughing with him. And I said, well, and he's like, but you know what I will do? Because you called me so many times, send me an email. And whenever I do have an opportunity, I'll put you in the mix. I said, oh, great. That's a win in itself. He at least gave me that. So, you know, it's just being persistent. There's some people also that I've called early on where I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was just kind of calling because I thought that was what I had to do. So, and they knew I was very new. Like it just from the call, the way I sounded, it very visibly was, this guy's new in the business, probably won't make it. We'll see what happens. Like, let's maybe not give him a chance yet. So there's one guy actually that he used to say no to me all the time. I already have a relationship. I'm good. And then he opened the door for a coffee like a couple months ago, and you know, it was just one of those like breakthrough moments. And if I always look at it, once we get in front of people, they're more likely to want to work with us because it's that they now know who you are. It's more than just the phone call. But also keep them in your call queue until they don't ever want to hear from you again. So unless they very formally tell you, don't ever call me again, you should still call them. So it's even though I do sometimes get that feeling in my stomach, like, ooh, this is going to be a really bit weird call. I don't know what's going to happen. Um, sometimes I'm actually pleasantly surprised, and I'm glad I did call. So I still do get that jitter sometimes whenever I do call someone who I know wasn't very nice before, but then sometimes I walk away from that call like, man, they were just having a bad day, or something must have really upset them that day, because today they were great, and we have to just know that people don't always have the best of days every day. So maybe we catch them on a Friday when they're about to go to happy hour with their friends and they're excited or something like that. So, but be persistent until they tell you absolutely no, never happening. But even if that, still maybe put them on a tickler or something like that for 3 months later, and maybe their guy retired or gal retired, or maybe something changed and something didn't work out for them and they need to look at other options. So you never know when your time will be that you should call. So just be persistent and don't give up. So
You could be like the Jim Carrey on Dumb and Dumber and saying, so you're saying there's a chance.
That's exactly what came to my mind too.
I got it something. Oh, we're being recorded, huh? Never mind.
The danger of recording.
Yeah.
Just to give you guys some encouragement. So one of our clients that we just not too long ago, I think we closed a pretty big deal, and we're doing another one with them right now. But I called on him for 7 years, and finally he just said to me, he goes, "You've been so persistent." He goes, "I have to do the deal with you because you just called me so many times that." So, and I'm like, "Hey, I don't care. I'm, shameless, whatever it takes." But that's happened a couple of times over the years where someone's just virtually said, "I'm doing the loan with you because you've just been so persistent." So it really does pay off more than you'll ever really know, that people will make choices because you're starting to show them too, like, "Hey, I'm resilient. I'm willing to go the extra mile. I don't give up that easy." They take that into consideration and be like, "Oh, this guy's been so persistent. I mean, that's how he's going to be on the deal." And never give up on it. So I think that that goes a long way. And so these have been really refreshing, Dan, and great ideas and tips and tools. And it really only takes one little, tweak to make a really, really big difference on your production. And so thanks for doing that. That's going to mean a lot for all the future people that come through here too. So that was the training today from Dan Zlackett on cold call training. So